Let's do it on air, because otherwise I have to hear it twice.
Oh, I thought we were on air. Okay, go ahead.
No, we're not on air. Okay, 3.
You got my mic levels up?
Yeah, you're great. And you were great on the other one. The audio is crystal clear on these, by the way.
Right.
We use top-rate equipment. Okay, here we go. Okay, silent. Okay. 3, 2, 1. 57talk.com. Gary Cubetta, back by very popular demand. Buddy Landel. Buddy, part 2. Pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, it is a blessing to be back, Gary. Thank you for having me.
When we left,
and I want to thank everybody for all your viewers for writing in and responding. It's when you get a little bit older and you've been out of the business for a little bit of time, you think out of sight, out of people's mind, because your phone doesn't ring and stuff. So it's really it's a huge blessing to see that there's a response to this. So I'm looking forward to today.
A big response, buddy. Now, we left off in Memphis, 1983. You come out of Puerto Rico.
Right.
Star-studded talent. This was a red-hot period in Memphis wrestling. Now, you can continue with the story.
Well, I left Puerto Rico, I guess, somewhere around August, September of '83, and went directly into Memphis. That's when Lawler gave me the name Nature Boy, and had the robe, and actually Jimmy Cornette, Jimmy Hart, and Andy Kaufman, all three of those guys were my manager, Dennis Condrey and myself. And it was actually Norvell Austin, Dennis Condrey, and myself, but it wound up being Dennis Condrey and myself. So it was kind of different being around Andy Kaufman, seeing him, through the 70s stuff on television, and he was a wonderful guy, very, very intelligent, very, very smart guy. And the funny thing is, when we didn't know that he was dying, right? And he had these open lesions on his body, and the finish called for they threw him out of the ring, and he got hurt somehow. And Dennis Condrey and I had to physically pick him up and carry him from the middle of the Mid-South Coliseum all the way to the back dressing room. Right now, in the meantime, he's got these open lesions on his body, and of course, nobody knew what AIDS was, and I'm not saying he had that. I mean, but we had no clue of disease or anything like that. All we know is that, when you can look at another person in the eye, and you're looking at the same thing, you're both, your eyes can tell a full story without saying one word. We saw these open lesions on Andy, and we had to carry him back, and Dennis looked at me, and our eyes met, and it's like we were saying to each other, oh my God, look at all these sores, and we got to pick him up and carry him. So I picked him up by the collar of the shirt, and Dennis picked him up by the shoelaces, and we carried him back to the dressing room like that.
Now I got to stop. You were in Memphis during the Andy Kaufman period.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, there's you can go to YouTube, and there's press my name in, and there's actually I'm there with Andy Kaufman on there. There's several of us, but
now if I remember correctly, during that run, Andy wore like a full bodysuit, like a sweater or a sweatshirt and long pants. So where were these open lesions?
Well, we actually kind of saw him in the dressing room as he was getting dressed, but they were like on his arm, on his forehead, on his neck. They were on his. I remember he did a skit on TV not long after that he had an open lesion on his neck, and he had people actually from the audience come up and touch it. Do you remember that skit he did?
No.
Yeah, he actually did that on like national TV, like Letterman or something.
Now, we're not saying he had HIV or AIDS, but
No, I'm not making any kind of...
because 1983, it wasn't too common. It was very uncommon, I would think.
Yeah, no, right. This was, before all of that. But
yeah.
I'm not sure what he passed away from.
Well, he had cancer, but I didn't know that he was suffering. The point of the story I'm getting at, buddy, is I didn't know he was suffering while he was wrestling.
Oh, yeah, he was in tremendous pain, yeah.
From the wrestling or from the sickness?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how long. I don't think he lived a whole lot longer after that. I don't really remember. I just recall, that when he died, I thought, that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, oh my God, Andy Kaufman died. It's not like Elvis died,
Yeah, it didn't come as a big surprise.
Yeah, it was like, oh, well, maybe that's what, you put two and two together and say, well, maybe that's what the open wound wounds were, the lesions, and I mean, these weren't like pimples, okay? These were like, these were big open sores.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Was Andy consistently in Memphis a big draw? Because he didn't just do that one famous match with Lawler. He
was there every week on TV. I mean, there were several there. I remember several weeks him being there.
And eventually he teamed up with Lawler, so it must have been a run for at least a few months. Did he draw the whole time, or did it kind of go its course?
Oh, it was not unusual back then to have a sellout. Yeah, so it was not unusual to have a sellout.
Why do you think, from your perspective, buddy, from your perspective, just seeing Andy in the locker room, why do you think he enjoyed the wrestling thing so much?
I think he was like the rest of us. I think he was a wrestling fan, and I think he looked at it from a business aspect and a creative aspect, and I think him and Lawler had crossed paths and their creativity blossomed together, and they saw a parallel plane where they could, draw money together. I don't think it was about the money for Andy at all. I think it was more of, the challenge of, can I do this? And then when he got in, he was saying, this is just like comedy TV or directing or whatever, and, this is just another creative art form, that another avenue for him to, venture off in to display his creativity and his artistry. So I think that it was a challenge to him in the creative field.
Did he wrestle in all the towns or just Memphis?
I remember him coming to Nashville. I think he went to Louisville Gardens a couple of times, but Memphis, Nashville, Louisville were the three biggest towns that we actually had. And I'm sure he went and did spot shows out there for Buddy Wayne. They called it the Buttermilk Loop. If you were on the A team, you had Monday night Memphis, Louisville, Tuesday night, and Wednesday was Nashville, or Friday or Saturday. But I mean, if you were on the Buttermilk Loop, you were like in Blytheville, Arkansas, Tuesday night instead of Louisville, and things of that nature. And so you was on the B and C team. So I think he might have made a few of those out of just pressure from Lawler to to help the other local promoter there. Him in good grace, him working but hard. So I'm sure he made some little spot shows, but I remember him doing the Nashville and Louisville, not mistaken.
But buddy, what was Jerry Lawler like in the locker room? We all see him on TV each week on Raw, and we've seen him in the ring. But behind the scenes, Memphis, he's the king of Memphis. What was he really like?
Jerry Lawler in Memphis would be like Junkyard Dog in Louisiana. It was another rock star sender. I mean, it was another, when you went out, everybody knew who he was. I mean, this guy was doing car commercials before it was cool. I mean, he was getting, quid pro quo. I mean, he was doing the barter system way back when. Jerry Lawler is probably one of the smartest, funniest, creative, artistic people that I have ever met in my life. As a matter of fact, I just left him a voicemail on his cell phone about 15 minutes ago. He's got a big show on the 4th of July in Memphis, that he wants me to come down on. But Jerry Lawler is one of my all-time favorite, and he is, there's just nobody that's, that is good as him, in my opinion, that is a booker, a promoter, and a worker.
Was there jealousy that he had such a high position in Memphis, or did the guys appreciate the fact that he pretty much guaranteed a full house?
Well, when you came in, you were at least surviving and making, a living for your family. It wasn't, Jerry didn't do the payoffs, Jerry Jarrett did. And Jarrett was, I always went in on a guarantee, so I knew what I was going to make. I have actually seen guys starve there that had full family. There's some really sad stories about guys coming in and, not being in the big towns and just barely, able to survive. So, but that wasn't Jerry's fault. Jerry Jarrett, handled money. And I can't even lay claim to that fact other than just what guys told me and what I personally witnessed. I never saw a paycheck of anyone else, or it's just what guys told me. These people weren't living high on the hog or anything, so to speak. So, I mean, I really don't know. That's just what I perceived, and I could be totally, wrong about that, but that's just what I perceived. But Jerry Lawler there was no jealousy whatsoever. I mean, look, everybody knew that he was a big dog coming in, and everybody was envious of anybody working with him because, I mean, you were going to get the top slot and make the most money you could make in that territory by working Lawler. And you were almost certainly guaranteed, you know, hot angles on TV every week and to be pushed and to be in front of a lot of people. So
was Joe LeDuc in Memphis when you were there in '83?
Oh yeah, Joe LeDuc was there.
What was Joe like? I mean, we all saw him on TV cutting his arm with the axe and all the crazy antics.
Well, Joe was a really nice guy. I mean, he had his personal private proclivities also. I mean, he had his quirk, but he was all in all a genuinely nice guy, very clean, loved to take baths and stay clean. And I just remember him being very anal about, to the point of OCD, on that. So, he liked to stay clean. So that's what I remember about Joe. Kind of easy to work with, He's was just a blast to be around, for a big, strong guy. I mean, he was really a big, strong, tough guy, as they go. But he was okay.
Were you there the day he did the thing with the axe in the arm?
Yeah, I was there when he did the axe with the arm, the bottle of sand on the forehead, and I was actually in the town that night. He had never had where they put the straps around his wrist, and where he had like 5 guys on each side pulling, and he would clasp his hands in the middle, and it had never been broke. We were in a spot show in Kentucky, and what happened, the trick to that thing is you have to get both sides pulling at the exact same time, and then it's almost virtually impossible for anyone to break that on anyone. And it's just a kind of a gimmick thing. But one side started pulling more than the other side one night, and it actually broke the thing. It was very embarrassing to Joe, and he got really, really physically mad. So that was
physically mad, meaning?
Well, he was just trying well, he had been. It was like it had been exposed, and he actually got beat in a shoot. He got beat by 10 guys, 5 pulling on each side. They started, one side started too early, and it just broke his hands apart, and he was wanting to hurt somebody, or hurt himself or something. I mean, he was really mad at that. It was hilarious. We was all laughing back. Of course, when he came in, we was going, damn, that's a shame, brother. That's horrible.
Buddy, would you guys be there the entire night? Like, let's say a card ran from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Would you be in the dressing room for the entire time or come and go?
Well, I guess I was always the main event, at least, never lower than the semi-main event by that time. So, and I always rode with Bill Dundee, and he was always either the main or the semi-main. So if you rode with us, you were going to be there from 6:30 to 7 till the end of the bell, okay? Usually what happens is the guys in the first 2 or 3 matches will ride to the towns together, and then they can be out of the building by, 8:30, 9 o'clock and be back home by 12. But if if you rode with us, you were looking at, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning getting home, depending on what town it was.
Buddy, when you're in that dressing room and the other matches are going on and you hear the crowd yelling and screaming, do you ever feel like walking out and taking a look at what's going on, or it's just so commonplace you don't even really care?
Well, it's kind of funny. I always tried to find a hiding place to watch all of the matches because I love to enjoy. I went to a match last night in Morristown, Tennessee, and saw a guy work that I've known for 25 years, and he had a lot of potential way back then. I haven't seen him in 10 years, and he's a fantastic heel, and I hugged his neck and told him how proud I was of him and that he was my hero and how much he had grown. So I always enjoyed watching guys grow, and I learned from everybody. I mean, if the guy just got in the business, he might step into the ring different than a little footstep that he might do. So I never precluded anyone. I never precluded anyone's time in the business or being green from learning from that individual. So I always tried to find a hiding place to watch, and it was easy, especially in Memphis, Louisville, Nashville, things like that. You can look through the curtain stuff, but you get some guys that, you got a guy first or so. This is what really pissed me off. You would get a guy that was, your first or second match. They're out there struggling. The fans are hollering, boring, and they're trying as hard as they can. And then you get some freaking hot dog, and I'm not going to mention any any names, but you get some guy that wants to be a frickin' hot dog, comes out in his underwear, to stand there. The crowd turns around, sees him and screams at him, and he sits there and eats it up. And a lot of guys are mean-spirited like that and steal the attention away from the first match, second match, third match, or whatever. There are guys that are that, hungry for attention. I personally never did it.
So you had to be careful about peering out the dressing room door into the arena because the attention would go to you and away from the action in the match.
Yeah, and that to me that was blasphemy. I mean, that was like the ultimate sin. I mean, I would never do that intentionally, And another thing I always, and this is what I learned from Bill Watts, I always tried to get there an hour before the matches for the simple fact you get hot dogs that don't want to get there before 9 o'clock if they're the main event, and you got the guys working first, second match, and they're in the daggone ring. Next thing you know, here comes Johnny Come Lately through the daggone back door, and there again, once all the attention goes off the match onto them. So, it's just
so, buddy,
it's a respect level that you learn that I learned from Watts, and it's just a respect thing that a lot of guys either A, didn't learn or just didn't give a tinker's damn about.
So, buddy, you said you'd find a hiding spot. Explain this to me, because I would think the dressing room would only attach through that one entrance. Where would you go?
Well, you would wait till the match goes out. What I would do is I would pick my spot in the timing. Let's say like that I got there and I wanted to go. And a lot of times you got the young guys will come up and say, "Hey, buddy, will you come and watch my match and tell me what you think about it?" I'd say, "Sure, I will, man." And so what happens is for me to get around that, let's say like for instance, the Louisville Gardens. The Louisville Gardens had two side entrances, babyface and heel, and then it was really, really dark in the stands where not a lot of people could see, and it was roped off so the fans couldn't get back, right? So as the guy was going into the ring, as soon as he stepped into the ring, the lights would go down. Well, as soon as the lights went down, I would hurry and scuffle to the seats where it's real dark and slide down in the seats, and I wouldn't draw attention away or attention to myself and away from them. It's just a respect thing.
Sure, I understand.
But you know what? It's something that I never had to do consciously. It was something that was drilled into me by Watt, and that's just something that it was second nature to me.
Buddy, let's say in Memphis the match.
And let me say this, Gary. Let me say this, Gary. There was a lot of guys. There was a lot of guys. Most guys were like that, like myself. There was, there's not a lot of guys that were hot dogs. There were some, but they were very few and far in between. But the ones that were hot dogs were very annoying.
Fair enough, buddy. The matches are over in Memphis. You're ready to leave. Was it ever an issue with fans waiting for you, or were you ever in fear late at night going out to the parking lot?
No. I always carried a gun with me, so I was never in fear of my life. The worst thing that you were afraid of is getting run off the road. I remember this one time, this friend of my wife and my family, this girl named Lisa, we were in the back of the Memphis Coliseum, and there was this girl that always stalked me, and she still stalks me to this day since 1986, and she would always be sitting outside of the gate. So when Lisa and I left that night, she was taking me back to the hotel. This girl started following us like really close to the bumper. Well, Lisa just started turning down all these side streets, and this went on for like 20 minutes, and I told her, I said, "Quick, turn right here." I said, "Now turn right here." When I told her to take that second right, we ran into somebody's private fence in their driveway. It was like a big security gate. Well, it turned out to be Charlie Rich, the country singer's house. We're smack right into his security fence. But that was just a funny...
So what'd you do?
After he passed away, I had actually wrote Charlie Rich's son and told him that funny story.
So what did you do after you hit the fence?
Well, the security lights came on and things like that. We just backed up and got out of there. So, the other girl took off. But I said all that to say this. There was just some crazies that were, the exception, not the rule. They were few and far between. Okay. But there's crazy people out there. They would follow you back to your hotel. You would be more worried about them cutting a tire or things like that. You always had them calling the room and things like that. But, they were always around outside your hotel room. 90% of the time, they were nice fans that would knock on your hotel room. They were very respectful. "Sorry for bothering you. Do you think you can take a picture with my daughter? Or can you sign this? Or look, I've made you some cake, cookies, some food." That was how most of the fans were all around the country. You know, you had your nutcases in there too.
Were you ever like held hostage in your room by yourself? Like, oh man, I can't leave the room. There's this kooks out. You know, maybe some young girls or.
You know, I never wore my celebrity like, you know, that I had to go like I was Jim Morrison and, you know, put a wig on and, you know, sunglasses and, or, you know, that I had to, you know, go hide out and hem myself up in the room or anything like that. I always enjoyed the crowd and I always made myself accessible to the crowd. So that was never a problem with me. And what I figured and what I found out was the nicer that you are to the people, even though I was a heel, because the heels had as big a following, if not bigger, in my opinion, as the babyface did. And if you're nice to these fans will watch your car. They'll feed you. I mean, they'll give you presents. I mean, they're wonderful people.
They really love their wrestling. Now,
it would behoove people to be nice to fans as opposed to being mean to them. So, or to avoid them, you know.
Dave Brown and Lance Russell were two of the most famous tandems of wrestling announcers, really in wrestling history. How did they interact with the wrestlers when the camera was off?
Lance Russell was always very, very professional. Actually, somebody asked Lance Russell one time who was the most talented wrestler in his opinion that he had ever seen, you know, and he said my name, which that was a very big compliment to me. You know, it made me feel like $1 million. He was always very, very nice to me. It was sad, and I could tell at that time when I was going through my, you know, my personal life struggle that I had there in Memphis in '86. I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. I mean, it broke his heart. He never said nothing to me, not one time. Never give me any advice or anything like that. He was always warm and loving, but I could tell it was like my dad. You could tell by like a father's look in his eyes that he wasn't disappointed. It was just that I was breaking his heart. And you know, looking back, it was sad, you know, because I was in such bad shape that, you know, you couldn't, you know, minus Christ appearing, you know, manifesting physically at the foot of my bed, I wouldn't stop what I was. So, I mean, you couldn't tell me nothing. And I'm sure he had been through that with other guys, and he had, you know, it probably figured there's nothing that I could say, you know, to help. So.
How about Dave Brown?
Dave Brown was always, he was always a really nice guy, very smart about wrestling, knew his thing, very professional, always on top of his game, you know, and he was, I tell you, Lance, the thing that I loved the most, even more than Gordon Soley, was Lance and Dave Brown were so good at slapstick. I mean, they were so good with just off-the-cuff stuff. I mean, they could roll with you. Whichever way you went, they could ad-lib and fit the storyline into what you're doing. And that was invaluable to a heel like me that never thought of an interview before I went out. I did everything. I never practiced anything or went over interviews. I just went out and did it and said it. And they were good at ad-libbing. And that's what made that Memphis TV.
And Gordon, that was the one weak spot that I think he had, was that if something went a little off kilter, you could see him getting very uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, let me tell you what I did to him one time. Ron Fuller was running USA Wrestling there in here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we were over at the Coliseum, and I was doing the co-commentating with Gordon Soley, and everybody knows Gordon. You know, he liked his vodka. I mean, that's you know what he likes. I mean, I went to his hotel room many a night, and I did my thing, and he drank, and we just sat there and we talked for hours. And but he asked me to go get him a glass of water, you know, that he would drink while he was talking, you know, you know, doing the voiceover on camera. He was talking live, but the you know, he was off camera. And I had went and poured him like a half a thing of vodka with ice, straight.
Oh boy!
And he thought he was drinking water, and he took a great big sip of that stuff, man. And his eyes just, you know, they were jaundiced anyway. They were yelling, bloodshot, and they halfway out of his eyes, and he looked over at me like, "You SOB, I'll strangle you to death." And of course, I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And you know, he didn't think it was too funny, but you know, he did get kind of smoother on that. But yeah, Gordon, he was very analytical about wrestling and very you know, predictable, and you know, the carotid artery, he's, you know, all of that stuff, and he had his own way. He was very mechanical about his ability, and he was the greatest, but Lance Russell and Dave Brown were so good at ad-libbing. I mean, you could throw them anything and they would come back something. I never stumped them. Maybe there's somebody better than me, but I never could stump them. I never left them speechless.
Well, Lance and Dave could take a show that would otherwise be rather mundane and make it interesting just with their banter back and forth, and they had a little bit of a comedic edge, and of course Jerry Jarrett always kept things interesting, and a lot of times Gordon was stuck, especially in Georgia with a lot of squash matches, could be a little dull.
Right. Well, I mean, you take that whole Memphis show, and the reason of its success was a formula. I mean, it was a mixture of talent, but it was definitely the creative writing of Jerry Lawler, the genius of Jerry Jarrett, putting all of that stuff together, bringing the right talent in for the right angles, but nonetheless, it would be Dave Brown and Lance Russell's abilities on the mic to project, oh my God, I've never, Monday night, Tuesday night, just them hammering and getting that over. Without those two, I don't think it would have been. I mean, you could have had 10 Jerry Lawlers or 10 Buddy Landels, 10 Bill Dundees, and I doubt very seriously it would have been as successful. It was a combination of the talents coming together. It was like the perfect storm,
Buddy, you were live in the Mid-South Coliseum, and you saw the cards actually take place. How would you rate the Memphis wrestling at the arena for entertainment value versus what was on TV?
Well, the TV, like I said, was early Saturday morning. Everybody partied Friday night. Everybody was tired. Of course, Lawler never partied. Lawler's don't even know what alcohol tastes like, or it's never taken an aspirin. So, I mean, he's always been the same. But the rest of us, that never got any sleep on Friday night and just, went in from wherever we come from the night before. I mean, it was tough and we did our best, but it was a condensed version of I don't like to say it was cartoon wrestling, Gary, but it was good Southern wrestling. I mean, just, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, the words escape me, sadly to say, but it was just Southern wrestling at its finest. And it was unencumbered by, like rules that other promotions would have. Everybody was free to do whatever they wanted to do. And Monday night, Mid-South Coliseum was definitely the time to showcase your talent. Thank God there is the Sabbath before Monday, because that day of rest was dearly needed after partying Friday and Saturday, and that rest going into Monday was definitely, you could feel the difference in your body and your creativity. At least I'm speaking for myself. So Mondays were very creative and very positive for me.
Now, in 1983-84 in Memphis, did you get main events with Jerry Lawler in Mid-South?
Well, I got to tell you, there was a funny story. I had kind of fell out of graces. With them. Now I'm losing, and I've got a photographic memory. And I'm sure you can tell by what all I remember by month and date and year. But something that escaped me is I was on a pretty big guarantee there, and I was wanting to leave. And Jerry Jarrett had took his limousine to Evansville, Indiana that night, and offered me almost double what I was making to stay. Well, this time Buck Robley had opened up St. Louis, and Buck Robley, Tully Blanchard, Randy Savage, myself, and Buck Robley had, opened that territory up, and he was running up there and wanted me to move up there and come up there. And so I turned down stupid decision. One of many, one of the multitude of idiotic decisions that I made. I told Jarrett, no, I've got to turn that down. I'm going with Buck Robley. But I can't remember where Buck Robley fits in. It was sometime around 83.
Well, I know where he fits in because he was in Central States.
Yeah.
There was a big controversy in Missouri at the time because Muchnick had retired.
Right.
Larry Madisick had...
Larry's a very good friend of mine. Larry and Buck were running it. I remember that.
Larry Madisick had opened his own promotion. Buck and Larry weren't together. Buck worked with Central States with Geigel and Race. Right. And Larry and Buck were kind of on the opposite sides of the promoting spectrum. They actually both get along well today. In fact, Larry Madisick hooked me up with Buck, and I spoke with Buck just before the interview. You said it was a mistake. Was it a mistake because of the territory?
Well, let me say this. I hold Buck Robley in such high esteem that I was just for sure that, that he was going to... Look, he was booking, in 1982 when I was in San Antonio with which I kind of didn't even mention I was in San Antonio. It was because it was such a blip on the screen. But funny enough, Buck Robley had a great big long Lincoln Continental, and Bruiser Brody was riding with him. I'm a young babyface, been in the business 3 years. I meet Buck Robley. He's booking for Joe Blanchard. I meet him in San Antonio. He says, "Come on, kids, you're going to ride with me." He goes, "You got any drugs on you?" I said, "No, sir, I don't do drugs." He goes, "You're fired." I went, "Whoa, fired?" I go, "Wait, I got some pot on me." He goes, "Okay, get in the car. You're riding with me." So that was my first introduction to the Colonel. And so Buck was booking, and I mean, even in '82, man, we were making, $1,000 a week back then, 21, 22 years old, making $1,200 a week. And then Tully Blanchard takes the stinking thing over away from Buck Robley, and then all of a sudden, because I look like Gino Hernandez, and the girls like me, Tully was always deathly jealous of me. Oddly enough, Gino and I got along wonderfully. As a matter of fact, there was a match with me and Gino on from that time period on YouTube. Your viewers can go watch, but you can tell by the video that him and I look like brothers. And Tully Blanchard hated me and started booking me in San Antonio, Port Arthur, Texas, Odessa. And what I'm trying to say is he would book me from one end of the state all the way to the other end of the state, all the way back on the other end of the state. And I had like 3 bookings a week, and that was it, making $300 or $400. So I mean, Ray Charles could see it was time for me to go. So that was my time in San Antonio. The other thing is that I think that I remember Larry and Buck working together somewhat, because I remember Larry, either that or Larry was coming around to the Kill or the Checker Dome where we were working at, because Eddie Mansfield was there too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they were separate, because Larry
Okay,
Madison...
well, they could be, but I remember Larry being around, though, because I would have had no other way to meet Larry, and that's when I first met Larry in 1983.
Now, buddy, I want to stop you for a minute, because we interviewed Buck Robley on 57talk.com. We interviewed him for 6, 7, 8 hours.
Right.
A lot of people have emailed me and called me and basically said that Buck created a history where Buck was not, in their eyes, that great a booker. Now, hold on. I've spoken with a lot of the legends since then, and Buck Robley was one of the most respected bookers in their eyes they had ever worked with. Now, straighten our audience out. Was Buck Robley the real deal when it came to booking?
Brother, I mean, $1,500 a week don't sound like a lot, but when you're working a small territory like Memphis in 1983, that's the equivalent of making, $5,000-$6,000 a week now in a very small territory. So, I gave that up to go work for Buck Robley. That's how high of esteem that I placed Buck Robley in my life. I've been with Buck Robley. I know Buck Robley's the one that basically helped create the Junkyard Dog. There would probably be Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Bill Watts, Eddie Graham, Dusty Rhodes, and Buck Robley. Those are probably five and maybe a couple of more. In my opinion, now this is just my opinion only, of the greatest minds that I have ever seen in a 30-year career. And I've been around them all, since 79. So I had been around everybody that had been a booker probably since 1979. I had been around. Buck Robley is definitely up in probably the top 3.
Well, Paul Orndorff yesterday told me basically the same thing. I think Buck is kind of lost in wrestling history, and I think it's kind of sad.
It's very sad. Not only that, but Buck had a gimmick that that he put on his arm and stuff. Buck was a tremendous wrestler also. Buck had well, look, here's what Buck had. Buck had the confidence of the wrestler in a major's territory for Bill Watts. I mean, so he had the confidence of Bill Watts, which was enough for me. And he was booking all of these stars and creating talent. I mean, he helped shape and form so many careers. I mean, there's a plethora of names that I could go on and on about that Paul Orndorff was instrumental in jump starting their career, making guys money, selling out for guys to make money. You know what I'm saying? And listen, Bill Watts held him in high esteem, so that's enough for me.
So you go to Central States, you're working with Buck Robley, but you've already tipped us off. It was a mistake. Why was it a mistake? Even though Central States is always a mistake, but why was it a mistake for you?
Well, because number one, nobody told me how cold Kansas City was, man, in November. I mean, it was so cold one day. Me and Barry Orton was sharing a room together, and I walked outside, and it was so cold. I told Barry, I said, I ain't even going to the show tonight, brother. I turned around, went back to the room, and went to bed. I mean, it was just freezing up there for number one. And number two, I don't think there was a huge financial backing. In the meantime, Dory Funk is starting to book Charlotte, North Carolina now in 1984, and Dory is wanting to give me a starting date to come over to work with Flair. And listen, people, I've heard people say, "Oh, Buddy Landel's full of crap, man. He always places himself at these places and always makes this stuff up." But I defy anyone to go challenge my information, this factual information. In 1984, when Dory Funk Jr. was booking Charlotte, it was at the lowest it had been in almost the history of that promotion. That's how bad they were on their ass over there. And he wanted me to come in.
Buddy, let's try and get a timeline going, because Crockett in Charlotte usually did very good business.
Right.
But I've heard consistently that when Dory was booking, there was a period where things really fell apart. Now, was this before? This must have been after Sergeant Slaughter and Kernodle versus Steamboat and Youngblood, right?
I really wasn't keeping up with the territory, so I can't speak intelligibly about that now.
Okay.
But so I can't speak to anything that I don't know about. It's just I know that Dory told me that it was down. Now, I love Dory Funk. I worship him. I love him and his wife, Marty, to death. I think Dory is one of the greatest workers, him and Terry, of all time. It's not a slide on Dory Funk. I think that he was handed a position, and Crockett was grasping at straws, and he was who was available at that time. Usually it was Blackjack, Wahoo, Ole, and then that's when Dusty came in, okay?
Wait a minute.
So now we're at the end.
Hold on. You're getting ahead of me here.
Okay.
When you get into Mid-Atlantic, Crockett.
Right.
Dory Funk, how long was he booking for during your when you come in?
I have no idea, because I stayed 2, maybe 3 weeks up there for Buck, so it was a very short, very, very short period of time.
So you come into Mid-Atlantic.
No, I didn't go to Mid-Atlantic.
Where'd you go?
Nope. After I left Central States, I went back to Memphis for a little small run. Now, by this time, and I'm adding all this together, okay? I'm closing 1983 right now, okay?
Okay.
So at the end of 83, this would have been November, December of 83, okay? This is a true story. You can ask the Road Warriors. You can ask Lawler. You can ask anybody that was there at the end of 1983. The Road Warriors was there at the Mid-South Coliseum their very first night. That was my very last night there, okay? Prior to this, like I'd mentioned before, Bill Dundee had went down to work for Bill Watts, the booker. Well, everybody said that ain't going to work. Bill Dundee ain't going to work because he's a little man in a great big territory, and little bitty guys don't know how to book great big guys. Now, that was the conception, right? That was the perception, okay? Anyway, it turned out to be further from the truth, because Bill Dundee made more money for Bill Watts than anybody did. Bill Dundee is one of the best is probably my favorite booker of all time. I know I've said everybody's my favorite booker, but Bill Dundee is just him. I just got off the phone with him prior to speaking to you, and him and I are very close to this day. So what happened was Bill Watts had talked Jerry Jarrett in to come in. Bill Watts flew up to the Mid-South Coliseum and wanted to get some talent out of there to take down to Mid-South for 1984. Well, he wound up getting me, Dundee, Bobby and Tommy, the Fantastics. Stephen Stan didn't go. He got Terry Taylor. He got the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express. He raped Jerry Lawler of talent. This is the honest-to-God truth. He raped that dressing room of talent, because all of us left Memphis and went down to work with Dundee in Mid-South, okay? My very last night there, I was wrestling. Now, I went from the main event working with Jerry Lawler in a very few short months to opening match I'm working with Angelo freaking Poffo, okay? They got me in the curtain-jerking match of the Mid-South Coliseum, sold out, the Road Warriors' first night there. I had just met them. They walked up and tell me that I am going to work first match, 10-minute Broadway with Angelo Poffo. I think he was like 90 then. You know, he's like 115 now, but I mean, you know, he was old, right? And so, I mean, back then I was really cocky. So, I mean, if you ever interview Lance Russell, ask him about the time when Buddy Landel came to the ring, and I grabbed the microphone away from Lance Russell, and I looked at the crowd and I said, I'm Nature Boy Buddy Landel, and I don't wrestle first match here or anywhere else. I threw the microphone down, went back to the dressing room. Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett both stopped me and said, you'll never work in this business again. And they were really pissed off at me. I got my stuff, I left, and went straight to Louisiana, and that's a true story.
I never heard that.
Yeah, that's a true story.
Wow.
Yeah, sold out Coliseum. I grabbed the microphone and said, I don't wrestle first match here or anywhere else.
What was the fans' reaction to that?
Well, they didn't know what to think. They, you know, I'd buzzed a couple of guys before I went out, you know, and actually what happened was I went and buzzed a couple of the guys, and they went and told Jarrett and Lawler, and they met me before I went to the ring, and they said, don't do what you're getting ready to do. Don't do it. I said, oh, don't worry, I ain't going to do nothing. Then I went out and did it, and they met me at the store coming back.
Beautiful.
And said, you'll never work in this business again, which, you know, prophetically, you know, in hindsight, it was, you know, a reverse curse. I mean, that's when my career really took off. That's when the legend started, the crazy crap I did.
So you were in Memphis when they integrated ICW with the Poffos and Memphis Wrestling?
No.
Because Angelo Poffo must have been part of
that. Well, they were there, but I remember Randy coming in. You know, you got to remember at this time, you know, 83 and through there, brother, I wasn't too good for, you know, much, you know, mentally. I was spiritually bankrupt. You know, I was, you know, it just started a long process of a lot of damage, you know, to my career and my life at that time. That was the beginning of it. So, you know, a lot of things escape my memory right now. And I know a lot of people are going to go, well, that's pretty convenient, as good as your mind is. But, you know, that was the beginning of, you know, my downfall right there. And it was a slow progression of several years.
So at what point, now we're Central States, we got a little Memphis, we got a little Mid-South. When'd you go into Crockett?
Well, the whole year of 1984, the whole year I worked for Bill Watts in Mid-South. That's when Magnum, and I like to say the class of 1984, in my opinion, was the greatest array of talent ever assembled in one territory Bill Watts had. Magnum, DiBiase, Dog B, Butch Reed, Rock and Roll, the Midnight Express, the Fantastics, Terry Taylor, you know, and the list goes on and on. But Paul Orndorff, I mean, all of these, Ernie Ladd, the Samoans, we were all there. Dr. Dusty Williams. As a matter of fact, Dr. Dusty Williams, the guy that helped him write his book, had called me and said, Dr. Dusty Williams said, and this is actually in Steve Williams' book, that I was the actual guy that trained him how to wrestle, and I had his very first match with him.
I'm just went and got the results from the Superdome from 84, because I don't want to skip over you. If you were there for a whole year,
yeah.
Let's see, 84 Superdome. Were you at the last Stampede?
I was. The Superdome in 1984, the funny story about that is that Ernie Ladd had fell in love with me, man. And I told Ernie one time, I said, you think Watts is going to keep me around? He says, brother, let me tell you, if you try to leave Mid-South Sports, Bill Watts will have your legs broke. I was a utility guy. I was the guy that could go out and get beat every week on TV and have more heat than any other heel there. Because I would get beat and come back and say, well, you know, I just kicked his teeth in. Who am I wrestling next? People are going to go, man, you're lying. You just got beat. What do you mean I got beat? I kicked that guy's ass in 10 minutes. What are you, ribbing? So, I mean, people just love to hate me. But this is the thing in the Superdome where I don't know who I wrestled.
Oh, I do. Here we go. April 7th, 1984. This was the first time you were in the Superdome in 84 since it was the first show. Buddy Landel defeats Lanny Poffo in the fourth match.
Okay, well, is that the same one where the Junkyard Dog and Ernie Ladd and Butch Reed that did the tar and feather match?
No, that's
in the main event.
No.
Well, there was two Superdomes.
Okay, wait, hold on. June 16th, 84. This is the next one. Buddy Landel defeats Sonny King, and the main event was JYD he defeating Butch Reed in a ghetto street fight.
Yeah, well, that's the one where I had to, okay, they give me my cue to run in the ring, right?
Yeah.
Now, we used to take golf carts because, I mean, I'm talking like it was longer than a half a mile from the dressing room to the ring, okay? So they gave me my cue. I used to run in on Butch Reed and Junkyard Dog's matches all the time, okay? It wasn't a big thing, but you're talking about running a half a mile plus from the dressing room and hitting the ring. Never mind that I'm out of gas and blowed up sky-high heaven by the time that I hit the ring. But when I hit the ring, I'm supposed to drop an elbow on Ronnie West, the referee. I drop an elbow on Ronnie West, and I hit him so hard, I splatter his nose, and blood goes everywhere, breaks his nose. He's out cold, roll over, and they do the deal where we're going to tar and feather the Junkyard Dog. Well, they reverse it, and whatever happens, and I wound up getting tar and feathered in the Mid-South, in the Superdome. I got tarred and feathered with molasses and pillow bedding, feathers from a pillow.
So what you're saying is the run-in was so far from the dressing room to the ring that you were exhausted by the time you got out.
Yeah, I was blowed up, man.
That's funny.
Yeah, forget about it, man. I mean, actually, they had went into the finish like 3 times. Where the hell's Buddy? Where's Buddy? Where's Buddy? You know.
And you're working your way up the aisle.
I mean, I'm running like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest trying to get there. But I mean, it's at least, God is my witness, a half a mile at least from the dressing room all the way around the Superdome to the ring.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It was like doing a 4-minute mile, man. Yeah, that was.
I didn't know Sonny King. You beat him in this match in June 16th of '84. I didn't know he even wrestled in '84. What was he like at the time? Do you remember him?
Drizzling supreme dog shit. And I have never. Please forgive me. I try not to talk bad about another wrestler, but out of the thousands of guys that I have wrestled in this business, the only guy, the worst worker that bar none, in my opinion, I could have a match with a broomstick and get me to tell you about wrestling the Invisible Man in 1986 in Evansville, Indiana later, okay?
Okay, I'll make a note.
Yeah, but anyway, I can wrestle a broomstick, okay? People said Buddy Landel could wrestle a broomstick. I wrestle anybody. I could not have a match with Sonny King. Now, Sonny King was an ex-pro boxer, and I mean, he would tune you up fast. And I just, I told Bill Watts, I said, look, if I've got to keep wrestling Sonny King, I said, you just let me give you my notice. I'm not working with him no more. I can't. He's tatering me every night. His boots are made out of potatoes, And,
what was it? He didn't know how to wrestle, or I've heard he didn't want to.
He didn't want to
wrestle.
He wasn't willing. Let me tell you something. Out of the thousands and thousands of matches that I had, and I had from 1979 to 1999, I had 3,000 matches. Back then, you had to work 300 days a year, and it took you 10 years to get 3,000 matches under your belt. And the rule of thumb was you wasn't a veteran until you had 3,000 matches, okay? I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of guys, okay? I have never let anybody, let me rephrase that. Out of all the guys that I have ever worked with, there's only Terry Taylor, Jerry Lawler. Terry Taylor and Jerry Lawler are the only 2 guys that have ever called a match while I've been in the ring, since I had been a heel. Ric Flair, Dory Funk, everybody that you can imagine that I have worked with, always got in the ring and said, Buddy, Ric Flair told me, he says, Nate, you're the heel, you call the match. Not one match I ever worked with Flair, and me being 23 and him being 36 years old, breaking Elvis Presley's attendance record during Raleigh, North Carolina, June of '85, never one time Flair opened his mouth in the ring. I always called the match. Sonny King just plain old wasn't willing to listen and learn, okay? That's all it was.
And he'd potato you.
Oh, man, yeah.
And he could. He was an ex-pro boxer.
He hit me one time so many times with the left, I begged for a ride.
And you could take a punch as well as anybody. You had that magic. Jerry Lawler would hit you 30 or 40 times. Your head go back and forth. But
that was the highest compliment I think that Dave Meltzer had ever given, which I appreciate to this day. I could work with anybody, man, and I was willing to work with anybody, and I would do anything to make anybody look good. Look, my job was to make people look good. My job in 1984 wasn't make Buddy Landel look good. My job was to make everybody. Bill Watts told me, said, your job is to make other people look good. I said, you got it. So I never went out there to outshine anyone.
So did you try and take Sonny aside in the locker room and have a nice little chat, or not?
Yeah, I mean, he would just look at you and laugh. I mean, he was a nice enough guy. But brother, he was just an old school boxer, and mean, you know, I was 22 years old. He didn't want to hear nothing I had to say. I mean, this guy was 50 years old. You know, how many 50-year-old guys want to listen to a 22-year-old kid? But I was great at my craft. I knew what my job and my position was, to make Sonny look good. And, you know, and I tried my best to do that, and he just wouldn't listen. Everybody else listened. Butch Reed listened. Junkyard Dog listened to me. Everybody listened to me. It's just Sonny was just unwilling to, you know, to listen.
Ted DiBiase had a big heel run that year in Mid-South, and I thought he was very effective in that role before the $1 Million Man. What did you think of him at that time as a heel?
Well, I always went out to watch him in Orndorff's matches. I mean, shoot, do they get any better than Ted DiBiase and Paul Orndorff? I mean, look, this is another thing like I told you yesterday early in the interview when I very first started. Look at all the guys that I'm around. Paul Orndorff, Ted DiBiase. I mean, you would have to be blind, dumb, crippled, stupid, or insane to not go out and learn something from those matches. I mean, they were just unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable matches. And both of those guys were in tremendous physical condition. Couldn't go. I mean, excuse me, for them guys to 30, 40 minutes every night, that was commonplace. That was commonplace. There wasn't no 3, 4, 5 minute matches back then, brother. I mean, there was 5 matches on a card. There was 10 guys, and each guy pulled, you know, the shortest time the first match was ever out there was 20 minutes, and everybody else went longer, and that was to set up for Junkyard Dog, which of course, you know, would go maybe 7 minutes, 10 minutes, but it was designed that way.
How great was Paul Orndorff before he made his run in the WWF?
Oh man, he was Watts' number 2 top babyface. Well, I would say co-top babyface between yeah, he was his second baby. He was the co-babyface Junkyard Dog. He was over, man. I mean, Paul Orndorff. Listen, Paul Orndorff was a handsome man. I mean, this guy was built. I mean, like a bodybuilder. I mean, his face looked like it was carved out of granite. This guy was just looked like an Adonis, and I mean, he looked the part. Never mind, he would knock your stinking teeth out in a bar fight. He was double tough in real life. And let me tell you something about Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff was not only a tremendous talent, but Paul Orndorff did not suffer fools easily, brother. I mean, he did not suffer fools easily. I mean, you didn't go around him with the goofy crap. It was always business. He loved the business, he loved making money, and he loved his sons, and he loved his family.
Well, I lost you a little bit there. Give me an example of what you're talking about with Paul. If somebody did what would be the reaction?
Well, I'm not an arm wrestler, okay? I mean, at this time, I'm bench press 450 pounds. You know, I'm a big boy. This is before that I tore my. Well, no, I take that back. I'm not telling you the truth. I had tore my pec out at that time, but I was still a big guy, right? And everybody going to the gym, take juice and everything like that. So I was a pretty big guy, especially around the marks at the bars. Well, I'd gotten to an arm wrestle. I got talked into an arm wrestling contest one time. I've got very, very weak wrist, and for a big guy, and you know, I got beat. I mean, I'll just flat out tell you, a little guy beat me. He probably $120 and beat me. Well, Paul Orndorff was an amateur arm wrestling champion. Paul Orndorff was there that night at the bar, and they were kind of trying to make fun of the wrestler stuff because I kind of let everybody down, which remember is a fireable offense to Bill Watts. Okay, and I got my ass chewed out about that. I almost got fired over that because you don't lose to a mark ever. It's blasphemy, the unpardonable sin. And Paul Orndorff went over there and down there pulled the guy's shoulder out of socket. He beat him so bad. So he just, didn't suffer fool. You know, he didn't, he was all business. He loved the business and he loved his family and he loved going to the gym and that's all he loved.
What was the weakness in his game?
The weakness in Paul Orndorff's game?
Yeah.
Oh, sense of humor? I don't know, brother. You tell me, we'll both know. I never saw
I don't know. I mean, I think Paul at that time...
Paul Orndorff had no weakness. I mean, Paul Orndorff was, the envy of any guy that was in wrestling. I mean, there wasn't a better body. There wasn't a better looking guy. I mean, he just a great all-around athlete, man. I mean, he was somebody that you would want, your daughter to marry.
Charisma to burn.
Oh, yeah. He had it to spare, man.
Yeah. Were you afraid in '84? Were you afraid of Bill Watts? Was he like that boss that you kind of of hope he doesn't call your name?
No, Bill Watts by that time was like a second dad to me. He would scream at me a lot, but, I realized that people that scream at you, and I'd been an athlete all my life, and I knew that people that screamed at you loved you. People that ignored you didn't give a damn about you. So Bill Watts was on me. As a matter of fact, you can ask anybody that was there in '84. I to this day hold the record of the most fines in Mid-South sports. I got fined more than anybody. $500 of whack.
But
I'd get fined for any kind of infraction.
Buddy, you've already mentioned that you were starting to get a little bit into the substance issues. Did Bill know about that at the time, or would he be able to know, or did you hide it from him, or?
I think it's like having a homosexual for a child. Everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Do you like that analogy?
Well, sure. I mean, no, not my.
Whatever works for you, buddy.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. So 84.
I left you stumped on that one, didn't I?
Well, in modern day, politically correct, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say, so I'll just move on.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that, it wasn't a problem because I wasn't missing shows. I mean, we drove 100,000 miles that year. I mean, drove 100,000 miles. Documented. That's factual. We drove 100,000 miles. And, it was long. It was tough. You never saw your family. You were gone. And, we did whatever we could to stay awake and drive, man. Now, I'm not blaming it on that. It would just happen to be around. I tried it, and I liked it, and I kept doing it.
Buddy, when you're doing all this driving, is there ever an issue of whose car you're going to destroy with all these miles, or was it just...
Well, I drove with... what I usually did was by this time, I'm not driving with the junkyard dog like I did in prior years. What I did was I rode with Butch Reed everywhere, or a lot of the time it was Jimmy Cornette drove his car. It was Dennis, Bobby, and myself most of the year.
So let's say you're driving. It's late at night. You're in between shots. You stop to get something to eat. You guys must have been very recognizable, right, back then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, there was no interstate system north-south of between, Baton Rouge and Alexandria and Shreveport. It was all back road. There was Interstate 10 going through the bottom of the state, and there was, 40 going through Shreveport. In between that, north to south, there was nothing. I mean, we would wrestle on a Monday night in Memphis and have to be in Shreveport the next morning driving north, back road, 2-lane roads, all night, get to interviews the next morning at 9 o'clock. So there wasn't a lot of sleep going on.
So you go into a restaurant or something late at night, does everyone, their eyes light up? Oh, my God, I've seen these guys on TV.
Well, we were rock stars, man. Yeah, we were rock stars.
So what's that like? Do you pay for your meals? Are they free, or the girls, or what's going on?
Oh, that's two separate things, food and women. I mean,
okay.
I'm sure we got a lot of free stuff, you got more free drugs than you did food for some reason. I can never figure that out. Hey, the women, they've always been there. That was a dime a dozen, so let your mind wander on that.
Yeah, we'll keep that. So 84, you're in Mid-South.
Yeah.
You're having a great year. You're enjoying yourself. You're still not in the main event. Do you ever go to Bill and say, hey, Bill, put me in the top spot?
Never, because I knew that I wouldn't be the top spot. I was a supporting cast member. Nothing more, nothing less. And I knew that. And I was fine with it.
Did you think that you were going to stay a supporting cast member for your career, or did you think, man, give me a couple of years and I'm going to be on top?
I never thought about it. Honest to God, I never, ever thought about it. I was never insecure like Flair said he was in his book, which really prized that he was insecure. But I was never insecure. I had an abundance of confidence, either artificially or naturally. I always had, an abundance of confidence. But I never looked at myself no more. I lived in the moment. I really didn't plan, too far in the, and that goes to show you inside my psyche a little bit when, the drug abuse stuff. I never thought of, of consequence some odd reason. That part of my brain that says, if I do this stuff tonight, it's going to affect, A, B, and C, my family, my job, my career. I never thought like that. Oddly enough, and that's a malfunction in my brain that I never quite understood, and I'm sure there's psychology majors out there that's going to, be all over this and diagnose me and ring me and email me and,
Buddy, buddy,
give me time.
Buddy, but the thing is, let's be realistic. Everybody was doing it. It was just a matter that you were doing a little bit more than you should have, right?
Well, no, I wasn't doing any more than anybody else. The difference is that they could function and do it, and they could cut it off and go home. They never let it affect their life or their career. It consumed me. That started to be my career. I mean, that really started to, it consumed my life.
Did you have any close calls around 84 where you maybe mixed something that you shouldn't have mixed? And
no, I had way too much. I had too much respect for Bill Watt to screw that personal job up.
Okay,
that didn't come till the next year, 1985, which I'm sure we'll get into. But
yeah, we're going to get into.
No, I had way too much respect for Bill Watt to do that. My problem was just beginning to get bad. It wasn't bad at that time. It was.
So do you think that Bill Watts was a superior leader in the dressing room because he commanded respect from the guys, even yourself at this young age, where he kept the guys in check?
Well, he kept the guys in check because he was a double tough SOB, number one, and number two, he was an actual wrestler that had been on top and had drew money and made money. So it was easy. All the guys that he had in 1984 were actual athletes in their life. I mean, real athletes. They wasn't, just off the street. We were all really actual athletes. And so it was easy to follow him because he was more of a coach/player than he was a boss. And we respected him as a coach.
Buddy, did you ever see him get physical with anybody in the locker room?
My $800 Halliburton suitcase my wife had just bought me. But no, I never saw him. He was, Bill was the type of guy that would, get mad and just chew my ass out in front of everybody in the dressing room in the Irish McNeely Boys Center there in Bossier City, Shreveport. I mean, he would just ream me a new one. I mean, you could hear a mouse peeing on cotton over in the corner. I mean, it was so quiet. And he would just ream me out and say, Landel, I'm finding you $500. This is just unacceptable. I can't believe that. 30 minutes later, he'd call me in back in the booking room off to the side and give me a $500 bonus to boot. I mean, he was a father to me. To this day, he's a father. I mean, we call up and talk about the Lord. I mean, the Bible and future things like that, and we just have a really, really strong relationship.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Wonderful.
Oh, I love him. I mean, I really sincerely, as tough as those days were, I wouldn't have been what I was in 85 and on without Bill Watts. Without Bill Watts, if I would have just worked out for Don Owens in Portland, and I would have never been Nature Boy Buddy Landel to work and sell out with Flair and on like that. I would have never been me.
Buddy, back in 1984, there's no cell phones. I always wonder how the wrestlers knew about, how would they get in touch with you for your next opportunity?
You know what, brother? Working for Bill Watts, you knew when you had a starting date, and he would tell you when you were finishing up in enough time. And not only that, and I don't know what he did for other guys, but Watts always, got me booked. Now, by that time, Watts didn't get me booked after that. I knew that I was leaving, and Watts told me, said, look, we're going to be finishing this up, and about the same time. I mean, everybody knew. It was common knowledge when guys were finishing up. About this time, we had started running over in Dallas with Von Erich, Fritz Von Erich, and Butch and I were real hot at that time. He had turned babyface. Well, I'd turned heel on him, and he was a babyface, and we were doing matches over for Fritz and Paul Bosch in Houston and all of this. And Flair had actually flew over to work with Kerry Von Erich for the title, and Flair took me out to dinner one night and said, listen, I want you to come in and let's do the Nature Boy versus Nature Boy thing. This was the end. This was December of 84, and Flair said, when you finish up here, I'd really like for you to come in and do the Nature Boy versus Nature Boy thing. And he asked me how much money I was making. I said, well, I make, a couple of grand a week. He goes, well, I'll double it. And so I said, well, cool, man, let's go. And then Arn Anderson and I started the same day, February the 5th, 1985, Marty Lundy, Arn Anderson and I arrived. He came from Pensacola, from Fuller, and I came from Watt.
So 85, you go into Crockett. Flair himself asks you to come in.
Right.
Says they're going to double your pay.
Right.
You must have been excited, huh?
Yeah, I was excited. I mean, who wouldn't be? But the funny thing is, Arn Anderson and I, our very first trip, we're riding to a town, and Black Bart is sitting in the back, and he's telling us how bad the territory is and how long the trips are, and Bart looked at me, said to Arn and I, now Arn's over there for Fuller making $1,200-$1,500 a week, man, short trip territory. It's on fire, and as Arn Anderson and Black Bart says, I hope you boys are ready for some $300 a week. Me and Arn looked at each other and said the same thing and said, I'll get one $300 check and I'll be gone. And we both said it at the same time. And of course, that was not the fact. That Crockett always had an A team and a B team also, and poor old Bart just happened to be on the C team. So they had an A team and a B team. I don't know where the hell the C team was wrestling, but it wasn't on the same venues as us.
Hey, buddy, I forgot to ask you. In 1984, you're in Mid-South, but Vince McMahon is going national. What were you hearing about that from the guys and in the dressing room?
Nothing. I don't remember anything.
How about Pro Wrestling USA, where the NWA tried to go? Did you have anything to do with that?
You'll have to refresh my memory, Gary.
Well, Gagne and Crockett, they got together and they ran some cards in the Meadowlands.
Yeah, well, I wasn't privy to that. I don't recall that, but I do recall that while I was there in 1985, Crockett had started bicycling these tapes up into New York, and I remember we went to, New Platte, me, Flair, Dusty, JJ, and a bunch of us, and I remember, going up there and doing a show. They fell on their, it tanked. it was really bad. It didn't draw nothing.
Okay.
You can't go up there and run it. I remember the guys in the locker room saying,
whoa.
It's asinine trying to run against Vince McMahon. We all made that comment.
Wait, buddy, hold on. You went up to where?
I remember one town. Let me tell you this. You got guys that can talk. You got guys that can't talk on these interviews, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a 3-minute interview. Being interviewed for 3 minutes is a long damn time. It's an eternity. Okay. If you know what you're doing. Okay. JJ and I, when they were bicycling those tapes up into New York, this Crockett in '85, we were having to do 12-minute generic interviews. 12-minute generic interview. Brother, that's unheard of.
I remember some of that stuff, and some of those, I lived back east at the time, and some of those shows had odd moments, 12-minute moments like that, where there'd be these unusually long interviews, right?
Well, I'm out there with J.J. Dillon. How much of a struggle did we have? We were good at what we did, but I've seen guys go out there and just, even Jimmy Valiant, as good as he was, man, 12 minutes, that's a freaking eternity, man. Trying to talk on TV, now remember, I said the word generic. Generic means that these people up in New York are just seeing these tapes bicycle. This is a new market for us. So although they knew Flair and they probably knew who a lot of us were, they didn't know any regional angles that we had been doing. So there was nothing, generic, absolutely nothing to talk about.
Right.
Nothing.
Now, for people who don't know, when Crockett first came into the East Coast, this is what Buddy's talking about, it wasn't done with a very good focus. They would come in with these, like you said, generic shows. You wouldn't talk about specific angles. It would be more about, hey, I'm Buddy Landel, I'm the nature. There was nowhere to go with it.
Yeah, there was absolutely nowhere to go with it, man.
Why did they do that? I never understood what they were trying to accomplish with that.
I have no earthly idea. It was like a brain fart. I think, look, that was Crockett's downfall was trying to be Vince McMahon. Crockett's downfall was the Gulfstream airplane that he bought and the Falcon jet that he bought for $3 million.
Okay, we're going to get to that, buddy. We're in 85 still. He hasn't had his downfall yet, so.
No, but what I'm saying is I'm putting you in the mindset of Jimmy Crockett. Jimmy Crockett had a pocket full of pride.
Okay.
And he was not willing. His dad had been a promoter since 1935. He wasn't willing at all to give a quarter or give a quarter. So in his mind, he was going to be as big as Vince. Well, guess what? It didn't happen.
Well, that part of the story.
He had as good or better talent than Vince had, but it didn't happen.
So when you get in 85, they've got these weird shows that are running in New York, but still, it is red hot in the Carolinas, right?
Yeah, Yeah, and let me preface this by saying we only did a couple of shows up there. I remember 2 shows that we did, okay?
So you went up there without proper preparation, they bombed, and that was forget that, right?
Well, the rule of thumb is you want your tape played 13 weeks in a market before you have your first show.
So 85, what happens?
Well, I mean, 85 comes in and they start building me up, and I start working with everybody. Mag comes over to the Carolinas. He's Dusty's best friend. I'm doing, they're priming me to work with Flair during that summer. So I'm going around the country doing 60-minute Broadways with Ronnie freaking Garvin and Magnum TA. You talking about tough? That was hard to do.
Why, physically hard to do, or they could do the matches, right?
It was, brother, I'm talking about going nonstop for 1 solid hour with Ronnie Garvin and Magnum TA. I mean, it was just a physically excruciating. I mean, it was, you had to be in tremendous shape to go 60 minutes. Very few guys in this business say that they've gone 60-minute Broadways a week, months at a time. I'm talking about I did it every night, 6-7 days a week for 2 or 3 months, 60 minutes every night. Now, that sounds like a lot, and I'm not putting myself over because Flair did it his whole freaking career. And he had to do it with guys that were brain dead like Kerry Von Erich, and I love Kerry, but let's just be honest, okay? Flair going out and doing 60-minute Broadway with Kerry Von Erich is even better than I would have had to gone out with Sonny King and do 60-minute Broadway. So Flair is, man, in my book, there's nobody greater than Ric Flair. He's my idol. I love him. He's Elvis Presley.
So, buddy, why are they doing these 60-minute matches? Because I don't remember you in them, but I remember Magnum doing some with
what they're doing is they're building my credibility. Now, remember, I'm just coming in, and I'm calling myself Nature Boy. And it's like the unmitigated gall, the audacity of somebody calling themselves Nature Boy. I mean, never mind Buddy Rogers was the Nature Boy, and Ric Flair had already been through this schmoz of becoming the Nature Boy, and the audacity of him say, I wrote a little song one time. You want me to sing it for you? And I don't have a great voice, but I put this song together about Ric Flair, and you remember George Scott was the booker over there for Charlotte when Flair first, was wrestling Buddy Rogers, 70s, and all of them was making money and all of that. Well, I put this little tune together to the Beverly Hillbilly. It's it goes like this. It says, let me tell you a story about a little fat boy. Let me tell you the story first. Ric Flair, when he first got in the business, he wanted to be a cowboy, okay? That's what his gimmick was. He really wanted to be a cowboy like Jack Lanza, okay? So let me tell you a story about a little fat boy. He came from Minneapolis, wanted to be a cowboy. He met George Scott and bleached his hair, and everywhere he went, the people would stare. Well, Buddy Rogers couldn't believe that the little fat boy had the audacity to steal his gimmick and make it to the top. Flair met Landel and got his bubble pop.
Beautiful.
You like that?
Very nice.
Yeah, well, he's been a great champ. It's time to realize that his hair is green and he has sagging eyes. That's another verse, but I won't get into that.
Okay. Okay, so you're doing these 60-minute matches. Your body's killing you. You must be exhausted.
No, actually, I felt good, man. I'm 220. I'm 220, feeling good, making money.
Even after that Magnum suplex.
Oh yeah, Magnum was Magnum was terrific. Magnum was probably the most intense wrestler I've ever wrestled in my life. Just one word, intense.
Yeah. I think when we get ahead of ourselves a little bit, I think when he got in that car accident, that was not good for what Crockett.
Well, actually, the true story about that is that in 1986, we will get into this, and remind me, jot this down for me to tell you the story, but I was supposed to be with him the night that he had that accident, and I had quit that day to go back to Bill Watts in 86. You might want to make a side note of that.
Buddy, let's stop here. Can we do a part 3?
Absolutely, my friend. I mean, I'm loving this. It's great.
Let's stop here because our air conditioning in our office is not working, and I'm not sure why, but it's getting hot. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, so it's a little bit of an issue. And we can continue this. When would you like to do part 3?
How about Sunday?
Yeah, that'd be what time?
Just after church. I go to church with my mother. I will be back at probably about 1 o'clock.
Sunday, 1 a.m.
Or we can do it 2 or 3 o'clock. Just whenever.
It's probably going to be later.
That'll be. Call me 4, 5, 6 or anything like that, Gary. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. Now I'm going to stop the show, but don't hang up. Okay.
Okay.
Stay
great.
on just for a second. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with part 3. It's Gary saying so long, and we'll talk soon.